The following program is being brought to you by Rain of Fire Radio, a media outreach arm of Rain of Fire Evangelical Ministries. Our commitment is to sponsor programs that will assist in living a Christian life and win others through teaching the finished work of Jesus Christ.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rand Berkey, and welcome to Rain of Fire Christian Radio. Tonight we're going to be continuing to read from the book, Delivered from Deception. But as always, I like to start the broadcast by setting the stage, sharing one of the foundational scriptures for Rain of Fire Evangelical Ministries, as well as Rain of Fire Christian Radio. In Luke 4:17 through 19 it states, "And he was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah. When he had opened the book, he found a place where it was written, 'The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord.'" Christ is the message, and I'm only one of the bearers of the message. Now, I'm reading in excerpts, or actually chapters from my book, Delivered from Deception. Now, what we're going to do tonight, first chapter, it was talking about snatched. I'm not going to give too much away. I'm going to let you go out and figure it out for yourself, what I'm talking about. It's pretty exciting, and I think you'll enjoy it. Well, this one is the beginnings. Now, I'm going to put this within a context of what I'm talking about. I did this in the very first broadcast as far as the genre of what that time was like back in the 70s and the 60s when I grew up. I graduated from high school in 1975. I don't want to admit that, but that's in the middle of the rock and roll, Led Zeppelin, Eagles. We're talking about going into the disco movement, going into the later 70s, and it was still that social upheaval at the time. A lot of cults came out of the 60s and 70s, but a lot of people didn't know anything about them unless you were in metropolitan areas, or you may have heard something about, like the Manson family. Later on in 1978 was Jim Jones and the People's Temple. So you had these type of things coming, and then you had the Hare Krishnas that came in. You had the Beatles who introduced transcendental meditation, the Moonies with Sun Myung Moon, the Children of God with David Berg. Because this was also revival at the time for the church, it also gave rise to a lot of cults, a lot of Bible-based cults as well, which is basically what I got involved in. I mean, there's been cults forever. There have been the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses, which have been around for 100 years. You also had the New Age movement, which was basically spiritism, seances, that was propagated by really author Conan Doyle. And Edgar Cayce was part of that. Madame Blavatsky. That's actually in the late 1800s, early 1900s, you saw a rise of Joseph Smith and the Mormon Church, as well as Charles Taze Russell and the Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, just some backstory here. The Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Spiritism movement, all came out of the same area in New York, which I find fascinating. Be that as it may, so we're in the 70s. I graduated high school. Now, to understand where I lived is you looked out my front door, you saw cattle. You looked to the right side of where I lived. There was a lake, but there was also fields to the left side, pine trees, more fields. The road that I lived on for a long period of time was a dirt road, and then they came by at some point and seal coated it. So that's the type of area I grew up in. 3 or 4 miles away from the closest town, which is Columbiana. When I introduced this, I called it a very whitebread community. I think there was actually, the whole school, Crestview School District or Fairfield School District, there was only one African American. She was mulatto, like Barack Obama, white mother, black father. But that was the only, I guess, person, African American person that I knew. All the schools that we played sports with, whether it be basketball, whether it be football, and baseball, any of the team sports in Columbiana County, were all white people. We had some Italians sprinkled here and there, but basically you're talking about a county, except for eastern Columbiana County, which is Wellsville and East Liverpool, which had African Americans, basically white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. It's a lot of times I felt that, and I even feel now, that we kind of kept our sheets and our hoods in the closets because the way we would talk about other people. My dad worked up in Youngstown, which was about 15 miles away, a little bit more than that, maybe 20. And he worked in a mill. And he would come home and he would have all those racial things that you heard about in the 70s, what you call Italians, what you call Polish descent people, what you call African Americans. There was colorful language for each and every one of them because we were a white bread community. We had no thought in the world. There was no major crime really around where I lived. It was just, cow tipping was the biggest thing. Nobody knows what that is. You might want to look it up. Where I worked. When I was a kid, I did picking potatoes for a little bit. Then I worked on a farm. I was actually at Firestone Farms in Columbiana, where they had about 1,000 head of cattle, and we farmed at least 800 acres of land on which to feed these cattle out. These are the type of things that I was doing when I was older, and I'll get into that more in the book. I worked at a golf course. I was industrious. I wasn't lazy. Wasn't hanging around. I worked. I worked for my money. So, be that as it may, let's jump into beginnings. Like I said, I grew up in farm country outside a small town called Columbiana, which had once boasted being the biggest small city in Ohio. We had a modest home that my father contracted to be built on 5.5 acres of property that included a lake. The interesting thing is when my parents actually lived in Youngstown, Ohio for the first couple of years of my life, and then they moved down to Columbiana, which actually was basically my dad's stomping grounds. But he had bought 11 acres, and the house that we lived in, the first house that we lived in there, was actually, if you took the boards, the sideboards off, you would have found a log cabin. Now, on that log cabin, built off of it, was the kitchen. So me and Abraham Lincoln have something in common. We did have lights, though, and we did have indoor toilets. However, our furnace was coal. And I remember in those cold mornings, my mom going out and my dad going out and shoveling the coal in the furnace, so we'd be nice and warm. By all accounts, we were middle class and Christian. I was an only child for the first 10 years of life. Now my brother joined us. My upbringing was nothing out of the ordinary, and nothing could pinpoint specifically that would have sent me in the direction of the way, other than being at the wrong place, at the wrong time. My lineage was German. with a dash of French. My brother and I knew we were loved and cared for, even though our family was adept at openly showing it affection. We attended church faithfully. My scholastic achievements in grade school were marginal until high school. I excelled in high school, especially during my junior and senior years. My teachers had selected me to attend a reputable World Affairs Institute in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Buckeye Boys State, which was a national college. The cool thing about Buckeye Boys State, and you've set up a government, we've set up the state of Ohio government, and always somebody was trying to assassinate the governor. And they did so in this. I think a water ballooned in or something like that. I became a state representative. And there we passed laws. It was just set up like a regular government. We had 10 days to do the elections, to pass the bills, to vote on them, the filibuster, all those great things that you find in the government. I was inducted into the National Honor Society and received the Key Club is with the Kiwanis, Sportsmanship Award for basketball. In the 8th grade, I was very involved with and confirmed in the United Church of Christ. I was quite involved with church affairs, being a junior deacon in our church, singing in the choir, youth group president, and co-president of the Sunday school class. I represented the youth in our yearly regional church meeting. I seriously entertained the idea of becoming a minister at one point in time. Then an interesting circumstance snuffed that desire almost overnight. My change of heart with becoming a minister happened during my senior year. It occurred during a leadership meeting. Our minister, who had been ordained for over 33 years, led the meeting. He explained a problem concerning a couple in the church. The husband was having serious medical problems, and his wife had gone to specialists nationwide to seek his healing. She believed, based on biblical text, that if a pastor prayed for her husband and anointed him with oil, then God would deliver him from his ailment. The minister spoke candidly of his personal quandary. He was uncertain whether it was God's will for him to assume the role as healer. Hearing of his crisis of faith led me to my own. I felt a mix of shock and disillusionment. If an intelligent man of 30 years in the ministry was unclear about God's will, how could I expect to understand God's will? I resolved as a young man that I wanted to be of service to people and get closer to God. But I now doubted the value of my becoming a minister, considering that after spending his entire adult life in God's service, our minister lacked the clarity about God's will and left me with little reassurance that I would not suffer the same fate. My interest in pursuing the ministry simply evaporated. I thought, what would I gain and what could I offer if I were to pursue something that proved to be a dead-end exercise and a dead-end existence? Having abandoned my plans for the ministry, I bungled around for a while without mooring, without a sense of direction, without plans for the future. When I was young, I had spent a lot of time reading the Bible. My starting point was, of course, Genesis. I continued from there. I was in awe when I learned about the wisdom of Solomon and how he became the richest, most powerful king of his time because of his love for God. After reading Solomon's story repeatedly, I got down on my knees and prayed earnestly for God to give me the resolve and wisdom